welcome back to Libib's booktube channel. My name is Kaylin. Welcome back to another Thursday bookish video. Today we are going to continue my series. So a while back ago I did my worst books from 2015 to 2020, and today we are back with the favorites. So there's going to be a lot more positivity, a lot more gushing, instead of just like and feeling like an angry cat. So let's just get on to it. This is gonna be kind of like my good books at the beginning, and then we're gonna work my way up to the overall books that I have read during that time period. So this does not include any of my favorite books of this year so far. So first book is going to be The Darkest Minds by Alexandra Bracken, and this book I was heading into it, and this was one of the first books that I talked about on Libib's booktube channel, and I was not expecting to like it as much as I did, but I just felt so engrossed with the story. And the reason why I just love it so much was not only because of that, but the images and the like vividness that I was having while I was reading this book was just phenomenal. And I loved it so much. It took a while to read, so that's what was like, ugh. And I've heard things about the rest of the series. This was way after this book I felt like is Prime booktube. I felt like this was way after that point, but a lot of people said the second book was, it had the second book slump in the trilogy, and then the third book came out and I heard nobody talking about it. And then recently we had the fourth book in the series, which is kind of like a Hunger Games-esque type book, but after the series. So I also have heard nobody talk about that. So I'm just like scared and hesitant to continue on with the series, but this is just one of my favorite books of all time. Next up is a poetry book, which is Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. I was not expecting to like this book. I did not like Milk and Honey all that well, but then once I dove into this book, I was sold. I think it was the combination of reading this book and being at a certain time and point in my life where I was just like, this book and I just clicked. We became BFFs. There was nothing else to like stop us against the world. But this book just has the time and place that it was just necessary when I read it and loved it and enjoyed it. Next up is another poetry book, The Universe of Us by Libib. This was also another time, place, moment in my life that I was not expecting to like this book. A Barnes & Noble employee was working one day and recommended Love and Misadventures by Libib. So I read that on one of my bookish vacations, and then I also picked up The Universe of Us, which is also one of the first and probably only books that I will ever annotate and like go in there and write with a pen and whatnot. But this book is just such good, wholesome poetry that was perfect for me and that specific time in my life. So I love that both my poetry books have such an impact on me reading wise during certain times in my life, because I don't know if not necessarily if I'd be here, but I would definitely not been picking up more poetry books than I have recently, and also I would not have started writing poetry again / starting to write my secret project. So next up was another genre that I just kind of head dived into that I wasn't expecting to necessarily enjoy, let alone continue like my binge of this specific genre, but that is The Merciless by Danielle Vega. So good. I picked this up on a whim, and it honestly changed my life forever, like all these books on this list. I remember picking this book up and I read a couple of pages in the backyard, my apartment when I lived in Montana, and I was just sitting there like, and then I just started going, and I finished the whole thing, and it was so stinking good. And I was not expecting to like young adult horror, mystery, whatever this is. The Merciless is like John Tucker Must Die meets I forgot what the scary movie is because I've never seen it. I do not like scary movies. I watch Ghost Adventures and I get scared from Ghost Adventures, so if that tells you anything, I'm definitely a big chicken, and I was very nervous to pick this book up. But I loved everything. The horror, the gore, the suspense, the I need to know now and I have to read it now, and it discovered my love. And then I kind of just went on a binge that fall where I was just picking up every young adult horror mystery murder book that I could find. And I'm still always keeping my eyes out for those books these days because you can never go wrong with a good book. The series, bleh. I think these books though deserve to be standalones because if you have a series, it's just not meshes well with Kaylin that well. But if you have a standalone like murder spooky book, I'm definitely game. Next up is another book by Miss Alexandra Bracken, The Dreadful Tale of Prosper Redding, and this is also around the time that I read The Sun and Her Flowers. But this book was a middle grade book, and I was kind of on the fence about reading middle grade. I've never been like a huge middle grade fan, except for when I was like in elementary school, so diving back into this was a unique experience. I read it during the fall, which was the perfect time. We have Prosper, who has a demon living inside of him, so it's really unique and interesting. You get all the fall vibes. Also, once again, very vivid. And then I also forgot to mention with The Darkest Minds, this book also has like a big cliffhanger, and I'm like, ah. Have I continued on with the second book in the duology? No, but I just loved how vivid and descriptive and awesome and amazing this book turned out to be. And I just, I love it so much. And Alexandra Bracken, I just love her writing. Next up is another spooky book, and we have Through the Woods by Emily Carroll, and this book is amazing. This book is compiled of graphic short stories, and each one is spooky and terrifying and very frightful. I thought Through the Woods, it was maybe like a retelling of like Little Red Riding Hood, but when I got it and I started reading it and like looking at some of the spooky pictures inside, I was like, oh, this is not what this is. And I just remember like reading through it, messaging some of my bookish friends like Mesa and just being like, girl, look at the spooks. It's so spooky. And this was another spooky book that I loved. And I was like, graphic novel horror thing, I'm here for it. Just don't make me watch a scary movie. And so I like that we get 5 different spook stories, and they're all fantastic. I loved every one of them. Spooky, horror, make sure you're reading it at night, perfect time, but you may need to turn on the light after you finish because you're gonna be scared and you don't wanna go to bed in the dark. Okay, we're getting to the top 2 here, and this one will forever hold a special place in my heart. And I was watching Jesse the Reader. I was watching one of his videos, and he had mentioned Fake Blood by Whitney Gardner, and I was like, oh, that looks kind of cute. So I decided to pick it up on a whim, and I ended up loving it. We have our little guy here. We have AJ here, who hasn't had an eventful summer at all. So AJ decides to take matters into his own hands, and he gets paired up with his like dream girl at the school for this project in middle school, and he is going to try to swoon her over by dressing up like a vampire hunk of her dreams. But that's more than what he asked for, because AJ, our guy right here, learns that Nia, his girl that he's trying to crush on and trying to win over, is an actual vampire slayer, and there's Twilight references. I did not realize this was her debut middle grade graphic novel, Whitney Gardner's, but I love the story so much. The Twilight references, the graphics, the illustrations, everything is so perfect, funny, cute, and adorable. And if you're looking to get into graphic novels, I highly, 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 highly recommend Fake Blood, especially if you're a Twilight fan like I am. And last but not least, this last book is one of my favorite books, hands down, in the past 5 years. And you're probably thinking, Kaylin, it's not Fake Blood. It's not The Merciless. What are you going to talk about? Well, when I was making my list, I wanted Merciless to be at the top, but there was something else that really put the icing on the cake, and that is Illuminate by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. And this book is literally perfection. The cover, stunning. The insides, stunning, because we have all sorts of format that this book is told through. And I heard there was a diverse cast when you're listening to the audiobook. So I picked up the audiobook, followed along, was the best thing that I could do, because if I would have just read this book, like read it, I probably would not have as much fun as I did listening to it and following along. So this was one of my first audiobooks. I was never an audiobook fan, didn't really care for it, but then I was like, you know what, maybe I'll listen to it and read along. So we have a full-fledged audio cast, we have sound effects. Great idea, because this ended up becoming one of my favorite things. When I was in publications in high school and did like graphic work and stuff throughout my life, this book was just so aesthetically pleasing and I loved everything about it. I thought it was so unique that we get all these different formats of how a story is told in a big chunk, and it doesn't seem like a big chunk, because once you start listening to that audiobook, you can't put it down because it just whoosh, it's like a slingshot through space, like you're time hopping. And while I enjoyed the rest of the series, Obsidio and Gemina, they weren't my favorite. They were not Illuminae, horrifying, terrifying. AI scares me to death. So we get a little bit of spooks, a little bit of thrills, lots of sci-fi. There's also a time when I was watching The 100, so like I was having the time of my life living in this book. And this book, to date, out of the last 5 years, besides 2021, this book is hands down my favorite book, and I love it so much. I cannot recommend it enough. The trilogy, like I said, is all right, but this one takes the cake with the perfected writing of this duo. Well, anyways, that's gonna be it. Thanks for taking a little small trip down memory lane. It just feels so good to look back on the past 5 years and look at all the books that defined me, defined points of my life, and I feel like every favorite book had something to line up in my life that was like significantly powerful and that affected me. And I love that books and words and sentences, everything just has such an impactful moment on your life. So anywho, let me know in the comment section down below what your favorite book in the past 5 years is. Let me know. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next week for a new bookish video.